So you've come to listen to my story. I can feel it, you know. Even now, though I no longer walk upon this earth, I can sense your presence in my old English house. The walls remember me. The floorboards still creak in the same haunting rhythm, and the shadows whisper my name. My family thinks my story ended when they carried me in a coffin, draped in lilies and roses. But no, it was only the beginning. They thought I was gone, silent, powerless, just another memory. But I left behind something they never expected. And when they gathered at my funeral, the tears on their cheeks were not all real. Some wept for love, yes, but many wept for greed. Oh, I can still see it so clearly, as though I were sitting among them. My children, my grandchildren, their spouses, even neighbors who had barely spoken to me for years, all seated in the church with black veils and solemn faces. But behind their eyes, there was hunger. They were already counting, already measuring the weight of my house, my jewels, my savings, my will. You see, death has a strange way of stripping away pretenses. When the coffin lid closed over me, their mask fell too. And perhaps that is why I arranged everything so carefully, with a secret none of them could imagine. But wait, before I tell you what happened, when my lawyer stood and read aloud that final clause, the one that changed everything, let me take you back, for you must understand the history. You must walk through these rooms with me, feel the chill in the corridors, hear the sigh of the curtains when no window is open. Only then will you see why I made the choices I did, and why my family tore each other apart over my will. I was born in this house, a proud old manor in the English countryside, standing on weathered stone foundations older than any of us. Its oak beams were scarred with centuries of secrets. Its fireplaces had burned both warmth and sorrow, and its halls, oh, they had heard laughter, but more often, arguments. My family was not unlike the house itself, strong on the outside, but splintered within. As a girl, I knew wealth and comfort, but also silence. My father was a stern man, and my mother, though kind, was always quiet in his shadow. I swore, when I was young, that my children would never feel unloved, never fight as we had. And yet, life has a cruel way of repeating patterns, doesn't it? My own children, Edward, Margaret, and Peter, they were the apples of my eye. I raised them here, in this house, where the walls watched them grow from soft-voiced infants into loud, defiant adults. They played in the garden. They squabbled over the best bedrooms. They climbed the old apple tree out back until its branches nearly broke. For years, I thought I had given them a better life. But as they grew, I began to see in them the same shadows that haunted my father's eyes, the same sharp hunger I had prayed they would never inherit. Perhaps it was my fault. Perhaps I gave them too much, or perhaps too little. Who can say? But by the time I reached my old age, they were no longer simply my children. They were rivals. And when whispers of my will began to surface, when they realized that the fortune, the house, the treasures I had guarded all my life would one day be theirs, oh, how quickly love turned into suspicion. I remember the first time I overheard them talking. It was a winter's evening. The fire in the drawing room had nearly died, and I had gone upstairs to fetch my shawl. As I passed by the landing, I heard voices drifting from below. Edward's low rumble, Margaret's sharp tongue, and Peter's nervous laugh. They thought I was asleep. She won't last long, Margaret had said, her words slicing the air like a knife. And when she's gone, we'll finally see who she favored. Edward chuckled then, a bitter sound. Favored? Don't be ridiculous. The old woman always adored Peter. He'll get more than the rest of us. Mark my words. And Peter, sweet Peter, who once had been the gentlest of my children, had said nothing to defend me. Instead, he murmured, "Well, if she does, we'll see about that." A will can be contested. My heart cracked that night. standing there in the shadows, listening to the children I had carried in my womb, the children I had fed and clothed, and kissed goodnight, now speaking of me, as though I were nothing more than a bank vault waiting to be opened. Do you know what that feels like? To be loved not for who you are, but for what you will leave behind. But I did not confront them. No, I kept silent, for silence has its power. Instead, I began to plan. For if they were going to reduce me to a set of numbers on a paper, then I would make sure those numbers carried a lesson they would never forget, and so I began to write my will, carefully, secretly, piece by piece. Oh, they thought they knew. Edward asked me outright once, his face half pleading, half threatening. "Mother," he said, "you should let us help you arrange things. Make sure the inheritance is fair." Fair. Ha! What he meant was favourable. Margaret, too, hinted with false sweetness, saying, "You don't want us to quarrel after you're gone, do you, Mother?" And Peter simply avoided the subject, but I saw it in his eyes. The same hunger, the same greed. So I let them think what they wanted. I let them believe I was weak, forgetful, even foolish in my old age. But my mind was sharp, sharper than theirs. I consulted my lawyer, a loyal man named Mr. Whitmore, who had served me for years, and together we devised a clause, a secret clause that would only be revealed at the very end, when all the masks fell away. Now you must imagine it. The day of my funeral, the air was heavy, damp with English rain. The church bells tolled low and mournful, echoing across the gravestones. My coffin, polished and dark, rested before the altar, while my children sat in the front row, side by side, their faces tight with grief and calculation. Neighbours whispered, some in pity, some in gossip. My grandchildren fidgeted, not truly understanding, while their parents tightened their grip on their hands. When the priest finished his sermon and the final hymn drifted into silence, the lawyer rose. I was not there, not in body, but I swear to you, I was watching. I could see every flicker of expression, every twitch of a greedy hand. Mr. Whitmore unfolded the will, his spectacles glinting in the candlelight. The hush that fell over the crowd was thick, suffocating. He began to read, his voice steady, each word a hammer on my children's hearts. At first, they held themselves with dignity, nodding at the bequests. The silver tea set to Edward, the pearl necklace to Margaret, the paintings to Peter. But as the numbers came, the accounts, the properties, the investments, oh, how their eyes lit up. They leaned forward, practically salivating. And then came the clause. But no, my dear listener, not yet. You must be patient, for what was written, there would not only shock them, it would tear apart everything they thought they knew about me, about themselves, about the very blood that bound us. Ah, but I see you are still here, still listening to my trembling voice. If you wish to uncover what I hid in that final clause, if you want to know why my funeral became a battlefield, then don't wander away. Stay with me, dear. And while you're here, perhaps you might press that little button to subscribe, or leave me a kind comment below. It warms an old soul to know she is not forgotten. Now, shall we continue? Do you hear it? The sound of silence when a lawyer clears his throat. It is heavier than thunder, heavier even than the coffin that lay before them. That silence wrapped itself around my family like a shroud. Each of my children leaned in, their bodies tense, their eyes gleaming with hope and fear. You see, when a will is read, it is not merely paper and ink. It is a mirror. It reflects what you meant to people, what they expected from you, and what they will do when they are denied. Edward sat on the left, stiff as a soldier, his hands clenched together, his jaw grinding as though ready to pounce on every word. He was the eldest, my firstborn, the one who had always believed the estate would be his birthright. His sense of entitlement was carved into his very bones. Beside him, Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. though I noticed, even from the shadow where I seemed to float, that no tears dampened the cloth. My daughter, my only girl. Oh, how I had once adored her curls and her laughter. Now her beauty was sharpened into a weapon, her sweetness a disguise. And then there was Peter, my youngest, my gentle boy who had become a man I could no longer recognize. He looked down at his shoes, lips pursed, but I knew that in his heart, numbers were already turning like cogs in a machine. The wheel began innocently enough, with the smaller things. To Edward, the silver tea set, polished so often that my reflection still danced across its surface. To Margaret, my collection of embroidered shawls, the ones she always admired, though she never truly cared for the hours of work behind each thread. To Peter, the oil paintings that had hung in the dining room, portraits of long-dead ancestors who had glared down at us during every meal. These trinkets, though valuable, were nothing compared to what they all waited for. And oh, how their spines stiffened when Mr. Whitmore turned the page. The accounts, the properties, the house itself, you could almost hear their hearts quicken, their breath catch. Edward leaned forward, his knuckles whitening. Margaret's lips curled into the faintest smirk, and Peter, though silent, glanced sideways as though measuring his siblings. The sums were read aloud, carefully, deliberately. The stocks, the bonds, the savings. A lifetime of prudence and sacrifice poured into neat figures. I had worked, I had endured, I had saved every coin, and here they were, not as love, not as memory, but as spoils. Edward's eyes gleamed like a wolf's. Margaret let out a soft sigh of satisfaction, though she mastered his grief. Peter gave the faintest of nods, as though confirming some hidden calculation in his mind. But then came the clause. Mr. Whitmore paused, adjusted his spectacles, and cleared his throat. His voice deepened as he said, "And now, as per the wishes of the late Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore." "That's me, my dear. There remains one final clause." This clause is to be read in its entirety, without omission. The room shifted. A murmur rose among the guests. My children leaned closer, suspicion flickering across their faces. What clause? None of them had known. Whitmore's lips tightened, and he began. "In the event of my passing, I leave the bulk of my estate, the manor, the remaining accounts, the jewels, and all hidden assets. Not equally, not by bloodline, but under a single condition." Edward flinched. Margaret's hand froze in mid-motion. Peter's eyes shot up. "The inheritance shall go in full to the one among you who proves themselves not by greed, nor by argument, nor by legal battle, but by an act of sacrifice, one that honors this family and the generations yet to come." A gasp. A ripple through the room. The children exchanged glances. Confused, alarmed. Some guests leaned forward in shock. Others whispered into gloved hands. Whitmore continued, steady as ever. "No child of mine shall inherit a penny. If they quarrel over this will, if disputes arise, if lawyers are summoned, if bitterness corrodes what little love remains, then all of it. Every last coin, every stone of this house, shall pass instead to—" He paused. Their hearts stopped. "The village orphanage, St. Agnes's home, which has stood for centuries, and cared for children who had nothing but hope." The silence that followed was not silence at all. It was chaos contained, a storm caged in human bodies. Edward's face reddened, his mouth opening but no sound emerging. Margaret dropped her handkerchief, her fingers trembling. Peter's lips parted in disbelief, his forehead slick with sudden sweat. "Do you see, dear listener? This was my blade. This was the knife I drove between their greed. They had always believed my love could be measured in gold. They had always assumed blood gave them entitlement. But love, true love, is proven not by what you take, but by what you give. And yet, I knew them. I knew they would not accept it quietly. That is why the clause was written as it was. A test, a trap, a mirror. For in their reaction, their souls would be laid bare before all. Oh, how I wish you could have seen it as I did. Hovering above, watching the tremor in their hands, the fury flashing behind their eyes. For the funeral was no longer about me. It was no longer about the ashes of an old woman lowered into the ground. It had become a battlefield, a theater, a stage where greed would strip them naked before God and neighbor alike. And strip them, it did. Edward was the first to break. He stood so suddenly that the pew creaked, his voice booming. "This is absurd. Mother would never do this. That man is lying." He jabbed a finger at Whitmore, who remained calm, the papers still in his hand. Gasps echoed. Margaret tugged at Edward's sleeve, hissing, "Sit down, you fool, you'll make it worse." But her own face was pale, her lips quivering with rage. Peter muttered under his breath, "It's a trick. It has to be." His voice cracked like brittle wood. Ah, my poor children. They had forgotten in their hunger who I truly was. They thought me soft, weak, easily swayed. But in truth, I had always been watching, planning, protecting something greater than their greed. And yet, though I was gone, I confess, watching them tear at each other broke me all over again. My heart, if the dead still have hearts, ached like a wound. For I had hoped, foolishly, that perhaps they would surprise me, that perhaps love would triumph, and they would join hands and choose peace. But love, my dear, love was not in their eyes that day. Not yet. Stay with me, won't you? If you've been listening closely, if you feel the chill in your spine, let me know you're here. Tap the like, whisper me a comment, for your voice keeps me alive in this dark place. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, so you'll never miss the rest of what happened in this cursed house. For this was only the beginning. The real storm was yet to come. Do you know what happens when greed collides with grief? It does not create silence. It does not create reverence. It creates noise. Ugly, jagged, desperate noise. That was the sound in the church that day, when my will turned their tears into fury. Edward had already risen, his face red, his hands trembling with the effort of holding himself back. "This cannot stand," he barked, his voice echoing against the stone walls. My mother would never give everything to some orphanage. An orphanage! Those filthy children have no claim. Ah, do you hear it? The venom in his words. Those filthy children. Once he too had been small, helpless, hungry for comfort. Once, I had pressed him against my chest and sung him lullabies. And yet now, the man before me was a stranger, spitting on the very innocence he once embodied. Margaret hissed at him to sit, but her hands betrayed her, clenched, white-knuckled, her nails digging crescents into her palm. She may have tried to appear calm, but her eyes flicked toward Whitmore, toward the folded papers, toward the coffin itself. She was calculating, always calculating, and Peter. Oh, my Peter, my youngest boy, my gentle child, who once picked wildflowers to place on my bedside table. He sat frozen, his lips quivering, his gaze darting between his siblings. His silence spoke louder than any scream, for in his silence, I saw a heart breaking, not from love, but from the sudden collapse of everything he had hoped to claim. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered behind gloved hands. Others stared in scandalized shock. But there were those, yes, I saw them too, who smirked, who relished the drama unfolding before them. The hypocrisy of the living. They mourn with one hand and gossip with the other. Whitmore remained steady, his face carved of stone. He let the storm rage for a moment, then lifted his voice. This clause was written by Mrs. Whitmore herself. Her words, her wishes. I am merely the messenger. Contest it if you wish, but be warned. Doing so forfeits all. That word, Forfeits. It struck them like a whip. Edward snarled. She was old, confused. She didn't know what she was doing. His voice cracked. His fist pounded against the pew. But Margaret grabbed his arm, her whisper sharp as a blade. Shut your mouth, Edward. Do you want them all to see you lose control? And yet, even as she scolded him, her own mask was slipping. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes darted. She wanted it just as badly. Peter finally spoke, his voice low, but cutting through the noise. This is insane. She loved us. She wouldn't punish us like this. His tone was wounded, almost childlike. For Peter, perhaps, still believed, somewhere deep inside, that love and inheritance were the same thing. But no, my darlings, love cannot be bought, and sometimes love must come in the form of punishment. Do you understand now why I did what I did? Why I crafted this trap so carefully? Because I knew them. I knew that money would strip them bare, show the truth of their hearts. And the truth, oh, it was uglier than I had ever feared. Edward slammed his palm down again. It's a lie. That clause is fake. Someone forced her hand. His words cut through me like ice. Fake. Forced. Had he so little faith in me, in my mind, that he thought I was incapable of such clarity? No, he could not accept that I was sharper than he, stronger even in death. Margaret's voice rose next, shrill and cracking. If this stands, we get nothing. Nothing! Do you all understand? Her mask fell completely then, her grief gone, replaced by panic. Her handkerchief tumbled to the ground unnoticed. Her cheeks flushed. He's tricking us. He's stolen it all for the church. The priest flinched at her accusation, clutching his Bible tighter. The murmurs in the pews swelled like a tide. Whitmore's eyes narrowed, his lips tightening into a thin line. And then, as though God himself had grown tired of their blasphemy, a clap of thunder split the sky. The church shuddered with the sound. Gasps erupted. Someone crossed themselves. Someone else whispered, "It's a sign." I, too, felt it. A strange stirring, as though the heavens themselves had lent me their voice. My children froze, glancing upward. For a fleeting second, fear washed across their faces, softening them into the children I once held. But it passed. Greed reclaimed them swiftly. Edward leaned in close to Margaret and Peter, his voice a hiss I could still hear. We'll challenge it. We'll tear it apart in court. I don't care what it costs. Margaret's lips curved into a bitter smile. Then we're agreed. If we must fight, we'll fight. Peter said nothing. But his silence was not surrender. It was calculation. And so, my dear listener, the seed was planted. The will I had written to test them had become the very weapon that divided them beyond repair. My funeral, meant to be my farewell, had become a battlefield. But this is not all. You see, I did not only write that one clause. No, I left behind something else, something none of them yet knew. A second secret, a deeper one, hidden in plain sight, waiting for its time to be revealed. Yes, I will tell you. But not yet. Not until you've sat with me longer. Walk deeper into the shadows of this house. For the next revelation will chill you to the bone. If you're still here, my dear, then you are braver than most. Stay with me. Subscribe so you don't wander away. Tap like so I know you're still listening. Leave me a comment. Tell me, do you think Edward, Margaret, or Peter will break first? Because trust me, one of them already has. The storm outside raged as if the heavens themselves wished to join the quarrel. Rain hammering against the stained glass windows of the church. Thunder rolling like drums of war. Inside the air was thick, not with incense, not with reverence, but with greed, anger, and the sour stench of fear. Edward's voice had been the loudest. Margaret's the sharpest. Peter's the quietest. But make no mistake, my dear, it was Peter's silence that frightened me most. For silence conceals. and those who conceal often strike the deadliest blows. Mr. Whitmore, my loyal lawyer, tried to steady the chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, please, I beg you, remember where you are. This is a house of God. This is a farewell, not a battlefield. His voice quivered, though he clung to dignity. But his words were stones, cast into a stormy sea. Swallowed, ignored. Edward leaned across the pew, his eyes wild. You're in on this, aren't you, Whitmore? Don't deny it. You've taken her for a fool, twisted her words, stolen what belongs to her children. Oh, Edward, my firstborn, my pride and my downfall. To accuse my most trusted friend, a man who had carried out my wishes faithfully, was to accuse me myself. Whitmore's voice dropped into ice. I served your mother for over 30 years. Every word here is hers. You dishonor her by doubting it. Margaret scoffed, her laugh bitter, breaking the hush like shattered glass. Honor? Don't speak to me of honor when you stand there robbing her blood. She spun to face the congregation, her voice rising higher. You all hear this? She's abandoned her family for strangers, for dirty, unwanted orphans. Gasps echoed. One elderly neighbor muttered, Shameful. But whether she meant Margaret's words or my claws, none could tell. And then, it happened. The first betrayal. Peter stood, slowly, deliberately. His voice trembled, but the words came sharp, like daggers. Margaret! Edward, stop. You're only making fools of yourselves. Can't you see? This isn't Whitmore's doing. It's Mother's. She chose this. The silence that fell was deeper than before. Edward's head snapped toward him, rage blazing in his eyes. Margaret's lips parted in disbelief. What did you just say? She hissed. Peter's gaze hardened. You heard me. Mother wasn't senile. She wasn't confused. She was angry with us. She knew what she was doing. Maybe we deserve it. My heart twisted at his words. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I glimpsed my sweet boy again. The one who picked flowers, who whispered secrets to me in the orchard. But the moment soured. His eyes gleamed, not with remorse, but with cunning. He had turned the tide not for love, but for advantage. Edward roared, You traitor! His hand shot out, gripping Peter by the collar. The pew rattled as wood scraped against stone. Gasps turned to cries. Margaret leapt to her feet, shrieking, Stop it! Stop this at once! But her own hands reached for Peter too, her nails flashing like claws. Do you see them now, my dear listener? Do you see my children, once angels at my knee, now beasts in the house of God? The coffin before them was not enough to quiet their rage. My still body lay only feet away, yet they tore at each other like wolves over a carcass. The priest tried to intervene, his voice rising above the thunder. Enough, enough! You shame yourselves. You shame your mother's memory. He struck his hand upon the pulpit. Do you not see? She watches still. If only they knew how true those words were. Edward released Peter with a shove, his breath ragged. You disgust me, he spat. You'd hand over everything we've built, everything, to a pack of orphans. Peter smoothed his collar, his tone eerily calm. Better that than watching you two tear each other apart and lose it all anyway. Margaret's eyes narrowed, suspicion slicing across her face. Or perhaps, she said slowly, her voice a hiss, perhaps you already knew. Perhaps you conspired with her. Perhaps she promised you more. And there it was. The crack, the seed of doubt. Peter's lips curved. Not into a smile, but into something colder. He said nothing, but his silence was damning. And Margaret saw it. Her face twisted, her cheeks blotched red, her fury spilling unchecked. You snake, she screamed, her voice echoing. All these years, pretending to be the innocent one, the quiet one. And all along, you were plotting. Gasps, whispers. A child began to cry. Outside, lightning flashed through the stained glass. casting their faces in colours of blood and fire. And me? I watched, helpless and yet strangely vindicated. For this was the truth laid bare. Not love, not unity, but hunger. Hunger so deep it rotted their very souls. Whitmore raised his voice once more. Though he was drowned by the storm within, I will remind you, if this fighting continues, the clause is triggered. Everything goes to the orphanage. Do you understand? You are sealing your own fates. But they did not hear. They no longer cared. Edward glared at Peter. Margaret hissed curses under her breath. And the congregation, oh, the congregation drank it in like wine. For nothing draws eyes faster than the spectacle of a family tearing itself apart. And as the bells tolled to mark the end of the service, I knew this was only the beginning. My will was not simply a paper. It was a flame. And my children, they were already burning. Ah, my dear listener, you are still here, aren't you? Still with me in this darkness? If you are, let me know. Press the like, leave me a comment, whisper me that you see what I see, and subscribe, for the storm is far from over. When the last hymn faded, when the final prayer was whispered, my funeral should have ended in quiet dignity. But oh my dear, dignity had long been drowned by greed. The congregation spilled out into the rain-soaked churchyard, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers, whispers riding the wind like ghosts. And my children, my Edward, my Margaret, my Peter, they left not as mourners, but as enemies. I watched them from above, as though the very raindrops carried my eyes. Edward stormed toward the carriage, his fists still clenched, his face twisted in fury. Margaret stalked after him, her lips moving fast, her voice sharp as a blade, even beneath the storm. And Peter hung back, his shoulders hunched, his gaze lingering on the church door, as though searching for something unseen. Ah, but what none of them knew was that the storm did not end with the funeral. No, the true storm waited in the house that had cradled us all, the house that kept secrets in its bones. They returned there together, though together is not the word. Side by side, yes, but united, never. The carriage wheels ground against the cobblestones. The horses snorted against the rain, and not a word was spoken between them. Only the thunder spoke, rumbling like distant drums of war. The manor loomed from the mist as they approached, its stone walls streaked with centuries of rain, its windows glinting with a cold, unfriendly light. Once it had been their sanctuary. Christmases by the fire, summers in the orchard, autumn nights with laughter spilling down the corridors. Now it stood like a sentinel, waiting to judge them. Inside, the servants had done their duty. Fires lit in the hearths, lamps glowing faintly in the halls, a supper laid out in the dining room, though no one had appetite. The smell of roasted meat clung to the air, heavy and unwelcome. Edward strode into the drawing room first, his boots thudding like the march of a soldier. He poured himself a drink. Brandy, 2 fingers, swallowed in one gulp. Margaret followed, tearing off her black gloves, throwing them upon a chair. Peter lingered at the doorway, his eyes flicking across the familiar room. The portraits, the heavy curtains, the polished oak table. I saw his lips twitch, as though remembering childhood games played in that very space. And then the memory curdled, replaced by suspicion. It was Edward who broke the silence. "This won't stand," he growled. "I'll find a way to overturn it. Whitmore thinks he's clever, but he can't fool me. The courts will see reason." Margaret laughed, not with joy, but with bitterness. "The courts? Do you think a judge will throw out Mother's will because you shout loud enough? Don't be an idiot, Edward," he rounded on her, eyes blazing. "And what's your solution then? To sit back and let the orphans take it all? To let the house fall into strangers' hands?" Margaret's lips curled into a smile, a cruel, knowing smile. "No, my solution is to find the loophole. There's always a loophole. Something she missed. Something Whitmore covered up. Peter's voice cut in then, soft but steady. And what if there isn't? What if she meant it? What if this was her final lesson for us? For a moment, silence fell. The fire popped in the grate. The rain rattled against the windows. Edward sneered. Don't play the saint, Peter. You think we don't see through you? Sitting there, quiet, pious, pretending to be above it all. You're just waiting for us to destroy each other so you can sweep in and claim whatever's left. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Yes, perhaps he already knew. Perhaps Mother whispered it to him. He was always her favorite. Peter's jaw tightened. His hands balled into fists at his sides. But he did not deny it. My dear listener, here is where the poison truly took root. Suspicion. Sharper than knives. Darker than night. Once suspicion enters a family, it spreads like rot. It devours trust. It devours memory. Until even laughter from long ago sounds like a lie. And the house. The house seemed to feel it too. The fire dimmed. The shadows lengthened. The floorboards creaked as though restless beneath their feet. My children shivered, though the room was warm. For the manor remembered everything. Every fight. Every secret. Every betrayal. And that night, it began to speak again. Peter was the first to hear it. He turned his head suddenly, eyes narrowing toward the hallway beyond the door. Did you hear that? He whispered. Margaret frowned. Hear what? A voice, Peter muttered. I swear, I heard a voice. Edward scoffed, pouring himself another drink. Nonsense, it's the storm. But Peter kept staring at the doorway, his face pale, his breath shallow, for he had heard it, though faint. A whisper, soft as silk, winding through the corridor. A whisper that carried my voice. My voice. He heard me. Oh, my dear, can you imagine the terror? To know your mother lies in the ground, and yet her voice curls through the hallways of the house you once called home. But Peter said nothing more. He only sat, silent and stiff, his eyes darting again and again toward the darkened hall. Margaret rolled her eyes, muttering about paranoia, while Edward drained another glass, his face growing darker by the minute. But me, I hovered there, unseen, watching them unravel, for the true secrets of the house had not yet surfaced. The will was only the spark. The flames were yet to come. And you, dear listener, you are still with me, aren't you? Still sitting in this haunted room, still watching the firelight flicker on their greedy faces. If you are, let me know. Press the like, leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. For this house has more to reveal. The night is only beginning. The night thickened around the manor like a shroud. The rain beat harder, the thunder growled closer, and inside, my children sat in uneasy silence, each one wrapped in their own venomous thoughts. The supper in the dining room lay untouched, roast beef growing cold, gravy congealing on silver platters, wine unpoured. Hunger could not enter a stomach already filled with greed. It was Margaret who first broke the silence, her voice tight as the laces on her dress. I'm not sleeping here tonight, she said, rising from her chair. This house, it feels wrong. I'll have the driver take me back to my flat. Edward smirked, swirling the last of his brandy. Run away then. That's always been your talent. Run when things get hard. Run when you don't get your way. Her head snapped toward him, her eyes burning. Better to run than to drink yourself into stupidity. Better to drink, Edward hissed, than to be a snake who smiles while she plots. Enough. Peter's voice, though quiet, cut through their spat like a knife. He rose too, his eyes flicking again to the hallway beyond the drawing room door. Don't you feel it? Can't you sense it? The house isn't... Right tonight, they both stared at him, ready to mock, ready to tear him down. But then, as though on cue, the lamps flickered. Once, twice. Then the fire in the hearth sputtered, spitting sparks across the rug. Edward swore under his breath, snatching a poker to push the logs back into place. Margaret's face paled. And Peter's gaze followed the sparks as though they were a sign. "Oh, you foolish children," I whispered, though only Peter seemed to feel it. My voice slithered through the air like smoke, brushing past his ear. He froze. His lips parted. His eyes darted to the portrait above the mantel. My portrait. There I was, painted decades ago. Young, strong, draped in pearls and lace. My painted eyes seemed to follow him, seemed to flicker with a light that was not entirely from the fire. "Did you see that?" Peter whispered hoarsely. Margaret turned. "See what?" "The painting, her eyes. They moved." Margaret laughed nervously. "You've lost your mind." But she did not step closer to look. No. She kept her distance, as though some instinct warned her not to test it. Edward, of course, scoffed. "Mother's dead, Peter. She's not watching us. She's not here." And yet, as he spoke, a sound carried down the corridor. Slow, measured, footsteps. All three froze. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of heels on wood. My heels. The very rhythm they had heard since childhood. When I would walk the halls in the evenings, checking windows, whispering prayers before bed. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Edward's jaw clenched tight. Peter, pale as parchment, whispered, "It's her." No one moved as the sound came closer, then stopped, just outside the drawing room door. Edward snarled, trying to mask his fear. He stormed toward the door, flung it open, and found nothing. Only the hallway, dimly lit, shadows stretching long and thin. But on the rug, just beyond the door, lay a single black glove. My glove. The very one buried with me. Margaret screamed, stumbling back. Peter whispered a prayer under his breath. Edward stood frozen, staring at the glove as though it might leap up and strangle him. I hovered there, unseen, watching them break apart piece by piece. For the house was not just haunted by me. No, the house itself was alive with memory, with secrets, with the echo of every oath, every betrayal, every promise ever made beneath its roof. And secrets, my dear listener, have a way of clawing themselves free. Peter picked up the glove at last, his hand trembling. "This isn't possible," he murmured. This is a sign. She's trying to tell us something." Margaret's voice trembled. "Tell us what?" But before Peter could answer, a sharp crack rang through the house. It came from the library. The three of them rushed there, their footsteps thundering down the corridor. Edward flung the heavy oak door open, and inside, they saw, one of the bookcases had swung ajar, a hidden door. Behind it, a passage, dark and narrow, breathing out a stale, cold air. They froze, for none of them had ever known this existed. And yet, there it was. The house revealing its spine, offering its secret to them. "Mother," Peter whispered, clutching the glove to his chest. "Mother wanted us to find this." Margaret shook her head, but her eyes betrayed both terror and hunger. Edward clenched his jaw, his greed burning through his fear. "Then let's see what she hid from us." "Ah, my dear, you are leaning closer now, aren't you? Your heart pounding with theirs, your breath caught in your throat. If it is, let me know. Tap that like, leave me a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Because the deeper we go into this house, the darker the truths will become. And trust me, the secret passage does not lead to safety. It leads to ruin." The air inside the hidden passage was thick and cold, smelling of dust, wood polish long forgotten, and something else. Something older, something alive. My children hesitated at the threshold, their shadows stretching along the stone walls like guilty thoughts. Edward's fists clenched, Margaret's nails dug into her palms, and Peter stood silent, clutching my glove to his chest, as if it could protect him from what was coming. The passage was narrow, forcing them to walk single file. The flickering light from Edward's pocket watch reflected off the stone walls, revealing scratches and old carvings, initials of children long gone, hearts etched into the walls, and dates from centuries past. The house, my house, had been alive long before any of them were born. It remembered every step, every lie, every betrayal. Margaret whispered, her voice a mixture of fear and fascination. Do you think Mother left this for us? Edward snorted, though it sounded hollow. She's dead. There's no for us. Only for whoever is clever enough to claim it. Peter did not answer. His eyes were drawn to a small engraving near the floor, nearly hidden in shadow. E.W. 1910. He traced it with a trembling finger. My initials. A reminder that I had always known more than they thought. That even as a girl I had secrets. Secrets that would outlive me. The passage wound downward, narrowing until the ceiling was low, forcing them to stoop, cold stone pressed, against their shoulders, the air thick with the scent of earth and mildew. The flickering light of Edward's watch revealed stairs carved into the rock itself, descending deeper than any of them could remember from childhood explorations. At the bottom, the passage opened into a small chamber, and there it was, a wooden chest, bound with iron, aged with centuries of neglect. Its surface was scratched, etched with cryptic symbols, and the lock. Oh, the lock gleamed as though daring them to open it. Edward stepped forward first, eyes alight with greed. Finally, this must be it. The rest of the fortune. The proof she hid it all from us. Margaret followed, her hand hovering over the chest. Yes, yes, this is what she wanted us to find. This is it, isn't it? Peter, clutching my glove tighter, spoke at last. Wait, we don't know what's inside. Maybe it's not gold. Maybe it's a test. Edward laughed, sharp and bitter. A test? She's dead, Peter. There is no test. Only treasure waiting for the cleverest child. With trembling hands, Edward tried the lock. It wouldn't budge. Margaret joined him, pressing her fingers against the iron, while Peter studied the carvings on the chest. And then he noticed it, a tiny inscription, almost invisible beneath the dust, written in my hand. Only the pure of heart may claim what lies within. Margaret's laugh died in her throat. Edward's brow furrowed. Peter's eyes widened. Pure of heart? Edward scoffed. That's nonsense. How can anyone claim treasure based on some moral test? But Peter knew. Oh, he knew. He had always known, even if his own greed had clouded him. I watched, hovering in the shadows of the room, as the first seeds of fear and realization took root. For they were not clever enough to understand me yet. They had not yet seen that the chest was not simply treasure. It was truth. It contained my life, my choices, my memory, and the lessons they would never forget. Margaret reached for the chest again, brushing aside a layer of dust. Then we open it, she whispered. We're the children. She can't deny us. We'll claim it. Edward leaned in, his face grim with determination. Enough talk. Let's see what Mother left us. Peter hesitated. Do you really think this is what she wanted? Maybe it's not for us. Maybe it's for... Before he could finish, Edward slammed his shoulder into the chest. The lock resisted. Then, with a creak that echoed like a scream, it gave way. The lid lifted slowly, revealing its contents. And there, staring back at them, were not jewels, not gold, not stacks of notes. Instead, there were letters, hundreds of them, tied with ribbons, dust-stained but intact. Photographs, yellowed with age. Old diaries, the spines cracked and fragile. and in the very center, a small envelope, sealed with my wax crest. Eleanor Whitmore's mark. Edward's face fell. Margaret's lips quivered. Peter's hands shook. This isn't treasure, Edward said, his voice low, almost fearful. What is this? Peter picked up the envelope. It's addressed to us. Margaret reached for it, but Peter held it out of reach. Wait, we need to read it properly. But Edward snatched it, tearing it open in impatience. The letter unfolded. The ink faded but legible, and as he read, the room seemed to grow colder. Shadows lengthened. The fire from upstairs flickered. The words on the page were simple, but their weight crushed them all. My children, you have always thought my love could be measured in gold. You have fought over it, argued for it, envied it. But love is not wealth. Love is sacrifice, integrity, and truth. Only the child who understands this may claim what is truly mine: the house, the accounts, the jewelry. They are not for the greedy. They are for the one who proves, in heart and action, that love is greater than desire. Let this be your test. Fail, and you will forfeit everything. Ah, my dear listener, do you feel it? The chill that ran down their spines. The weight of my words, even after I was gone. Edward's face contorted with fury. This is insane. This is madness. She's mocking us from beyond the grave. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Or perhaps rage. Then we fail? Then we get nothing. All this. She gestured at the chest. All this for nothing. Peter said nothing. He folded the letter slowly. His lips pressed tight, but I saw it in his eyes. The flicker of understanding. Perhaps he was the first to truly hear me, to see me even now, and that, my dear, is when the real test began. The letters lay sprawled across the floor, their ribbons tangled, their ink faded with age. Each envelope, each folded page, seemed to pulse with the weight of decades. Secrets, confessions, memories I had hidden, waiting for the right moment. The children leaned over the chest, their breaths shallow, their eyes darting from letter to letter, drawn into my final lesson. Edward tore into the first envelope, impatient as ever, and began reading aloud. His voice wavered as he stumbled over the words. My dearest Edward, you have always been so eager, so impatient, so full of fire and desire. Your father's temper, your ambition. It is in you, but remember, ambition without kindness will destroy you. You will have opportunity, yes, but it must be earned, not taken. Edward paused, his face flushing, and scoffed. Opportunity? Earned? What nonsense. I've earned everything simply by being her child. Margaret snatched the next letter from the pile. She unfolded it with trembling hands and read aloud, Margaret, my sweet girl, beauty and cleverness have always been your allies. But cleverness without honesty is poison. You may charm and deceive, but remember, all masks fall eventually. Beware the shadows you create in your own heart. She dropped the letter onto the floor, as though it burned her fingertips. Her eyes met Edward's, a mix of fury and accusation. See, she's warning us both. Peter finally picked up the central envelope, the one sealed with my wax crest. His hands shook as he broke the seal, and he carefully unfolded the letter inside. The words inside were not simple warnings or distant memories. They were confessions, dark truths that had been hidden for decades, secrets that would shake their understanding of our family to its core. To all my children, he read slowly, his voice echoing through the stone chamber. I must confess the sins of our lineage, for you must know where you come from if you are to understand your place in this house. Our ancestors were not perfect. Betrayal, greed, and cruelty have twisted our blood, passed like a shadow from one generation to the next. and now it is in your hands to break this curse. Or continue it. The chamber was silent. Even the firelight from upstairs seemed to dim, as if the house itself held its breath. Peter continued, reading further. There is a room, hidden in this house, where truths are revealed. You will find the key, hidden not in gold or jewels, but in understanding, in courage, and in sacrifice. Only the child who can confront these truths, who can rise above envy and hatred, may claim the inheritance truly. The others will find nothing but ashes of their ambition. Edward slammed his fist against the chest. Ashes? This is madness. Letters? Secrets? What kind of inheritance is this? Margaret's eyes glimmered with tears, though her expression was hard, brittle, like porcelain cracked. She's mocking us, just as Peter said. This is a game, a cruel, twisted game. But Peter said nothing. He pressed a finger to the letter, tracing the words with a reverence his siblings lacked. Slowly, he lifted his gaze. She wants us to face the truth, he murmured. All of it, not just the inheritance, but who we are, what we've become. And that, my dear listener, is when the house began to respond. The shadows shifted on the walls, elongated and curling as though alive. The air grew colder. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper echoed through the chamber. My voice, carrying not anger, but warning. Look deeper. See the past. Only then may you know the future. Edward flinched. I don't hear anything, he shouted, but his voice trembled. Margaret clutched her shawl tightly, her teeth chattering. It's nothing, she whispered. Though her knuckles were white, Peter stepped forward. No, she's here. She's always here. And she left this for us, to guide us. If we can't understand, we'll lose everything. A sudden draft swept through the chamber, rattling the letters and papers, scattering them across the floor like fallen leaves. And there, beneath one of the scattered letters, Edward's eyes caught something. A small folded note, written in my own hand, nearly hidden by dust. The secret clause is the key. You may think the inheritance is in gold, but it lies in the choices you make. Betray, argue, or fight, and it will vanish forever. His breath caught. Margaret leaned in, eyes narrowing. Peter's hands shook as he realized the weight of the words. You see, Peter whispered. This was always a test, not of wealth, not of cunning, but of heart. And then, as though the house could no longer contain the truth, the walls seemed to groan, the floorboards creaked, and the fire upstairs flared, casting long, jagged shadows across the chamber. Edward, wild with fury, threw the note to the ground. I don't care. I want it all. I'll fight for it. But Margaret grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with sudden fear. Stop! Do you hear that? It was a whisper again, closer this time, clearer. The greedy shall inherit nothing. Only the pure may claim their legacy. Peter clutched my glove to his chest, whispering, It's true. We've been blind. Greed blinds. Only one of us can truly inherit. Ah, my dear listener, can you feel it? The tension in the room, the fear, the revelation. My children, my beloved, my flawed, greedy, human children, were about to discover that nothing in this house belonged to them, except what they earned through courage, honesty, and sacrifice. And the first real consequence of their greed had already begun. The chamber was silent, except for the whispers of the past, faint as a breeze through the trees outside. The scattered letters lay like confessions across the cold stone floor, each one heavy with memories, each one a mirror of what had been hidden in the heart of our family for decades. My children stood in a triangle of greed, fear, and hesitant realization. Edward, eyes blazing, fists clenched. Margaret, trembling yet calculating. And Peter, pale, clutching my glove. His face set with a quiet determination I had not seen before. The air grew colder still. and shadows stretched from the corners of the chamber like grasping fingers. The house itself seemed alive, humming with a presence that was neither cruel nor kind, but entirely just. It was my inheritance, my final lesson, a place where heart and greed collided, where truth waited to be recognized. Edward stormed forward, seizing a letter from the floor. This is ridiculous. All these warnings, all these whispers. It's a trap. I want my share. I demand it. Margaret echoed him, voice shrill and bitter. Yes! This is nonsense. She's mocking us from beyond the grave. How can a dead woman decide who deserves what? Peter, for the first time, raised his voice, calm but cutting through their fury. You don't get it. This is not about mocking you. This is about seeing who you truly are. Mother gave us a house, a fortune, yes, but it was never about money. It was about integrity, about love, about choices. Edward laughed, a hollow, jagged sound. Choices. You think we have choices. The only choice is to fight for it. That's the law of inheritance. But even as he spoke, the chamber shifted. The shadows moved independently, elongating across the walls, crawling closer to them, forming shapes they could barely recognize. Shapes of past relatives, ancestors who had suffered and schemed and failed. The fire upstairs flared, casting a harsh, flickering light that danced like a warning. Margaret stepped back, whispering, "Do you see that? The shadows, they're watching us." Peter nodded slowly. The house remembers. It knows who we are, and it will not reward deceit, envy, or greed. Edward growled, frustration boiling over. He reached for the chest, intending to seize it, to rip away what he believed was rightfully his. But the moment his hands touched the iron, a cold force pushed him back. He stumbled, eyes wide, his chest heaving. A whisper filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The greedy shall inherit nothing. Only the pure of heart may claim their legacy. Edward shouted, furious. I don't care. I am her son. I deserve it. But the shadows pressed closer. The walls seemed to bend slightly. The chamber itself, pushing against his rage. Fear flickered in his eyes, for he realized this was no ordinary house. This was my final judgment. Margaret, seeing Edward falter, tried to act clever, thinking she could manipulate the chest. But as she reached for it, the chest itself reacted. The iron bindings glowed faintly, warm and alive, and the letters around it seemed to rise, circling her in a gentle warning wind. Stop! Peter cried. Do not touch it with greed in your heart. And then, as the room grew colder still, the small envelope, the one sealed with my wax crest, fluttered toward Peter, as if drawn by an unseen hand. He caught it, heart-pounding, and opened it slowly. Inside, a folded sheet of parchment revealed the secret clause, written in my own hand, almost glowing in the dim light. To claim the inheritance, the children must act not in envy, not in anger, not in ambition, but in love and truth. Betray, fight, or covet, and all shall be lost. Only he or she who shows courage, compassion, and sacrifice may receive all that I leave behind. Peter read aloud, voice steady, despite the cold that seeped into their bones. Do you understand now? This was never about gold or jewels. It's about heart, and only one of us. Only one can pass this test. Edward roared in defiance, trying to grab the parchment. The shadows responded instantly, sweeping toward him. The chamber seemed to constrict, pressing in on his anger and pride. He staggered backward, eyes wide with terror. Margaret gasped, seeing the reaction, and tried to retreat, but the wind of the letters swirled around her, a cold whisper brushing her cheek, reminding her of the truth. Deceit and cunning cannot claim what is not rightfully earned. Peter remained calm. He looked at his siblings, at their panic, their greed, their inability to see beyond themselves. And then he made a choice that would prove his heart was different. He stepped forward, gathering the scattered letters, carefully placing them back in the chest. He spoke softly. "This house, these words, Mother. She gave everything to teach us, not to fight, but to understand. I will not take what is not mine to claim unfairly." Ah, my dear listener, can you feel it? The tension, the fear, the moment when a single choice can shift the fate of an entire family. Peter's courage, his humility, his integrity. These were the keys, and the house, my house, seemed to sigh. The shadows receded. The chamber grew warmer. The iron chest glowed faintly, acknowledging the heart that had acted rightly. Edward and Margaret stared in disbelief. Their greed had faltered. Their fury dissipated, leaving only fear. They had failed the test. Peter, clutching my glove and the parchment, felt the weight of the inheritance settle upon him. Not as a burden, but as a gift. He had passed the final trial, and that, my dear listener, is when the secret clause revealed its full power. The chamber was still, silent, as though holding its breath. The shadows had receded, the cold lifted, and the letters lay neatly within the chest, untouched, unspoiled by greed. Peter held my glove in one hand, the parchment of the secret clause in the other, and in that moment, I could see him truly, not as the boy who once trembled at my bedside, but as the man who understood my heart, even after I was gone. Edward and Margaret stared at him, mouths open, rage and disbelief warring across their faces. "This is impossible," Edward shouted. How can you have it? You didn't fight, you didn't." Peter held up the parchment, his voice calm and unwavering. "I did exactly what Mother wanted. I did not fight. I did not covet. I did not betray. I acted with heart. I accepted the test, not the treasure. And that is what makes me worthy." Margaret's lips quivered. This isn't fair," she cried. "I deserve this. I've been her child my whole life." Edward's fist shook. She loved me more. This is madness." Ah, my dear listener, do you feel it? That moment when the scales of justice tipped, and the greedy realized too late that their heart was blind, that their actions, not their words or claims, decide fate? The house seemed to acknowledge Peter's choice. A warm light spread through the chamber, faint but steady, illuminating the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The iron chest hummed softly, almost alive, and the letters fluttered like the wings of doves, returning to their places neatly, as though the house itself was bowing to Peter's integrity. Then, the final confirmation came. The small envelope, the one I had sealed with my wax crest, rose slowly from the chest, hovering in the air for a brief, magical moment before gently landing in Peter's hands. It contained the key, not a key to locks, but to understanding, to the full inheritance. Peter opened it with care. Inside were instructions, lists of accounts, deeds to the house and lands, and letters to charitable organizations. The true inheritance, the one I had promised, was far greater than mere gold or jewels. It was legacy, guidance, and the knowledge that love, honesty, and courage could outshine wealth and greed. Edward and Margaret watched in stunned silence. Their fury had drained, leaving hollow faces etched with shame. They understood finally the cost of their choices. Too late. They had failed the test. Peter turned to them, holding my glove tightly. His voice was gentle, but firm. "It's not about losing or winning, Mother's gift. It was about learning. I hope one day you see it." Margaret wept then, not just for loss, but for the realization of her own flaws. Edward's face was hard, but even he could not deny the truth. The house had judged, the letters had spoken, and their greed had failed, against the pure heart of one who understood. And I, Eleanor Whitmore, watched from beyond, my heart both heavy and proud. Heavy for the children who could not see, proud for the one who did. My final clause, my final test, had worked exactly as I intended. The fire in the hearth glowed warmly, the chamber itself seeming to sigh in contentment. The storm outside had passed, leaving the night calm, the house resting once more in peace. The secret clause had revealed its full power. Only the child of courage, honesty, and sacrifice could claim what was rightfully theirs. And the others, well, they had inherited a lesson, bitter but necessary. Peter gently closed the chest, securing the letters, and carried the parchment and glove upstairs. He paused, looking back at Edward and Margaret. "I forgive you," he whispered. "Mother taught me that even when others fail, love and integrity must prevail." Edward and Margaret had no words. They could only watch, silent, as Peter walked toward the heart of the house, ready to embrace the inheritance that was never just wealth, but the wisdom and trust of a mother who had known them all too well. Ah, my dear listener, now you see why I wrote that clause, why I hid my true wishes so carefully. Life is fleeting, wealth is fleeting, but love, integrity, and courage, these endure forever. And if you are still here, if you have listened to this story through every shadowed corridor and whispered letter, then perhaps you too have learned something. Press like, leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe. For there are lessons in every shadow, secrets in every house, and truths waiting for the heart brave enough to see them. The house was quiet now, at peace. My children had faced the test, and though some failed, the one who understood my heart had triumphed. And that, my dear listener, is the power of a mother's love, even beyond the grave,